Ravi, $10 million guaranteed returns, a Ponzi, and you kept taking money after you already pleaded guilty.
I traded Bitcoin derivatives and every investor on...
Once is a mistake. Twice is suspicious. Ravi Giri did this over 150 times across years, promised guaranteed returns, took the money, and kept doing it even after he pleaded guilty. That compulsion is about to cost him 9 years of his life.
You were on pre-trial release and still out there pulling in new investors. You never
I'm
stopped.
not discussing any of my investment activities without my attorney present right now.
He kept asking the federal agents what evidence they had. They had everything. 5 counts of wire fraud, a guilty plea already entered, more than 150 victims, and a court ledger showing over $10 million he could no longer account for. He had been on pre-trial release for 7 months. He had been told, in writing, by his own attorney, to stop. And in those 7 months, he had pitched at least 4 more investors on the exact same scheme he had already confessed to running. The federal judge in Columbus would call it a compulsion. The sentence would run 9 years. And the smoking gun was a single promise he made twice, in identical language, to investors who had never met each other. Guaranteed returns. 0 risk to principal. Quick question. Have you ever been pitched an investment that promised 0 risk and guaranteed returns? Drop a comment and tell me what happened, because almost every viewer who has lived through one of these schemes recognizes the exact pitch you are about to hear. And if you are new here, hit subscribe. We cover financial fraud cases the mainstream press buries on page 12, and we cover them like the federal cases they actually are. Rathnakishore Giri, called Ravi by every American who could not roll the R in his given name, was born in 1994 in Hyderabad, India. His family immigrated to central Ohio when he was 8 years old, landing first in a 2-bedroom apartment in Dublin before upgrading 3 years later to a 4-bedroom brick colonial in New Albany. His father was a senior systems architect for a healthcare data firm headquartered off Polaris Parkway, drawing a salary north of $140,000 by the time Ravi entered middle school. His mother worked the pharmacy counter at the Kroger Marketplace on Hamilton Road, a job she had taken not out of necessity, but because she had earned her pharmacy degree in Hyderabad and refused to let it go unused. The Giris were, by every measurable American standard, the immigrant success story that politicians invoke in stump speeches. The father drove a leased Acura. The mother kept a vegetable garden in the backyard with eggplant, curry leaves, and 3 varieties of chili pepper. Ravi and his younger brother, Akash, attended New Albany High School, a public school with the architecture of a small private college and a graduation rate north of 98%. The brothers shared a bathroom and a long-running argument about whose turn it was to take out the recycling. Teachers remembered Ravi as quiet, precise, and almost unsettlingly competitive at mathematics. He competed on the school's math counts team in 7th grade and placed 3rd in the state. He joined the first robotics club in 9th grade and wrote the control code for the team's drivetrain. His high school transcript carried a 4. 4 weighted grade point average, 7 advanced placement courses, and a national merit commendation. He scored a 1540 on the SAT. The college counselor's notes from his senior year described him as, quote, intellectually fearless, occasionally arrogant, will excel anywhere he chooses. He chose Ohio State on a partial academic scholarship and entered the Fisher College of Business with a stated intention to dual major in finance and computer science. He moved into the dorms on Lane Avenue in August 2012. He was 18 years old. His mother packed him 3 weeks of frozen meals in a cooler and cried in the parking lot for the better part of an hour after his father carried the last box up the stairs. What happened next is the part of the story his family would later struggle to explain to federal investigators. Ravi was a competent student, but not a remarkable one. His grade point average at Ohio State hovered around a 3. 3. He pledged a business fraternity, dropped out of it after 1 semester, and spent most of his junior year working as a coding intern at a financial technology startup with an office in the Arena District. The startup specialized in building dashboards for derivatives traders. Ravi's job was to write small chunks of Python that pulled price feeds from exchanges and rendered them as charts. It was at that internship, by his own later admission to federal investigators, that he first encountered Bitcoin in a serious way. The year was 2015. Bitcoin was trading around $250. One of the senior engineers at the startup had been mining it on a homemade rig in his garage in Hilliard since 2012. Ravi watched, listened, and asked questions. By the time he graduated from Ohio State in May 2016, he had opened a Coinbase account, transferred in $8,000 of saved internship money, and bought his first whole Bitcoin. He took an entry-level analyst job at a Columbus area asset management firm that summer. The job paid $62,000 a year and involved exactly the kind of work he had imagined for himself: building spreadsheets, modeling portfolio returns, sitting in on meetings he did not yet have permission to speak in. He kept the job for 14 months. His annual review described him as, quote, technically strong, ambitious, occasionally impatient with established procedure. His supervisor noted that Ravi sometimes pushed back on compliance review timelines and had to be reminded that the firm's processes existed for regulatory reasons. He quit in October 2017. Bitcoin had passed $5,000 and was climbing. He told his parents he was leaving traditional finance to start his own trading operation. He told his younger brother, then a sophomore at Ohio State, that he was going to be a millionaire by the end of the year. He told the friends he had kept from his fraternity days that he had developed, quote, a proprietary model for Bitcoin derivatives. He had not. What he had was a Coinbase account, a margin trading account on an offshore exchange called BitMEX, and the kind of confidence that only a 23-year-old with a 1540 SAT and no scar tissue can manufacture. By December 2017, with Bitcoin briefly touching $19,000, Ravi Giri had turned his $8,000 Coinbase deposit into something north of $250,000. He cashed some of it out. He bought a used BMW 3 Series from a dealership at Easton. He moved out of his parents' house and into a one-bedroom apartment at a luxury complex off New Albany Condit Road. And he began telling people, in person and on social media, that he had cracked the code on Bitcoin trading. Then, in January 2018, the market collapsed. Bitcoin fell 65% in 8 weeks. The proprietary model Ravi had been bragging about turned out to be the same long and hope strategy that had worked for every retail investor during the bull run. By April, his Coinbase balance was under $40,000. By June, it was under $15,000. He could have taken the loss, gone back to a salaried job in Columbus, and chalked the whole thing up to a 23-year-old's expensive education. He chose instead to lie. To understand what Ravi Giri did next, you need to understand the specific corner of the financial markets he claimed to operate in. He did not pitch himself as a stock picker. He did not claim to run a hedge fund. The vehicle he sold to investors, in every conversation that federal prosecutors would later reconstruct from text messages and recorded calls, was something called a Bitcoin derivative. A Bitcoin derivative is a contract whose value is tied to the price of Bitcoin, without the holder ever actually owning a single Bitcoin. The two most common forms in 2018 and 2019 were futures contracts, traded on offshore exchanges like BitMEX and Deribit, and perpetual swaps, which are essentially leveraged bets that can be held indefinitely. The appeal, for a certain kind of investor, is leverage. On BitMEX in 2018, a trader could put up $1,000 and control a position worth $100,000. The downside is that the same leverage that multiplies gains liquidates losses in seconds. A 2% move against a leveraged position can erase the entire principal in the time it takes to refresh a browser. This was the world Ravi pitched. He told potential investors that he had developed an algorithmic strategy for trading Bitcoin perpetual swaps. He told them the strategy was market neutral, which is a technical term meaning the position is hedged against directional moves in the underlying asset. He told them the returns were consistent, 8 to 12% per month, regardless of whether Bitcoin went up, down, or sideways. He told them, in writing and on phone calls that investigators would later subpoena, that the principal was guaranteed. There is no legitimate investment in the United States, in any asset class, in which an investor is promised consistent monthly returns of 8 to 12% with a guaranteed return of principal. The math does not work. The risk profile does not exist. The Securities and Exchange Commission considers any such promise a textbook indicator of fraud. The Commodity Futures Trading Commission, which regulates Bitcoin derivatives, considers it the same. Every licensed broker in the country is required, by federal regulation, to refuse such a pitch on its face. Ravi Giri was not a licensed broker. He had no Series 7, no Series 63, no registration with the SEC, the CFTC, FINRA, or the Ohio Division of Securities. He was a 24-year-old college graduate with a personal Coinbase account and a BMW he had stopped making payments on. The investors he pitched, almost without exception, did not check. They did not verify his licensing. They did not ask for audited returns. They did not request a copy of his trading platform's statements. They handed him their money, and they believed him. That belief is the system he exploited. Crypto, in 2018 and 2019, was the wild frontier of American retail investing. The regulatory framework was still being argued in court. The vocabulary was deliberately opaque. And the cultural currency of the moment was the young technical insider who claimed to understand a thing that most people could not even define. Ravi Giri walked into that vacuum and presented himself in glossy Instagram posts and at small in-person seminars at hotel conference rooms in Dublin and Worthington as the expert. No one checked. No one checked. The first money came in February 2019. The investor was a 36-year-old anesthesiologist at Mount Carmel East, a friend of a friend who had attended one of Ravi's hotel seminars. He wrote a personal check for $100,000. Ravi deposited it into a business checking account he had opened at a Huntington branch on Polaris Parkway under the name Giri Capital Strategies, LLC, an Ohio limited liability company he had registered the previous November. Within 2 weeks, the anesthesiologist received an account statement generated by Ravi on his home computer using a Microsoft Word template, showing his initial deposit had grown to $109,400. The statement listed a series of trades on Bitcoin perpetual swap contracts. The trades were fabricated. The numbers were invented. The account statement bore the logo of Giri Capital Strategies, a sans serif design Ravi had ordered from a freelance graphic designer on Fiverr for $45. The anesthesiologist showed the statement to 2 colleagues. Both wrote checks of their own. By the end of March 2019, Ravi had taken in approximately $430,000 from 6 investors. None of it was traded. Some of it sat in the Huntington checking account. Some of it was wired to his personal Coinbase account, where Ravi placed actual leveraged bets on Bitcoin and lost approximately 60% of the transferred funds within 90 days. Some of it paid for his apartment, his BMW lease, dinners at the refectory in Grandview, and a deposit on a luxury rental in Vail he booked for the following January. When the first investor, the anesthesiologist, asked to withdraw $40,000 in May 2019 to put toward a down payment on a house, Ravi paid him with money that had been wired in 3 days earlier by a different investor, a 42-year-old IT consultant from Westerville. The anesthesiologist received his $40,000 on a Friday afternoon. He told his colleagues, who told their friends, that the returns were real and the cash outs were fast. By the end of June 2019, Ravi had 31 investors and had taken in just under $2 million. This was the Ponzi mechanism in its purest and oldest form. Charles Ponzi himself, in 1920 Boston, used the same structure. New investor money paid old investor withdrawals. The trading was theater. The account statements were fiction. As long as new money came in faster than old money asked to leave, the scheme could continue indefinitely. For most of 2019 and the first half of 2020, new money came in. Ravi grew his pitch. He hosted larger seminars, first at the Embassy Suites in Dublin and later at the Hilton on Easton. He recorded YouTube videos in which he explained, in confident and technically plausible language, his proprietary approach to Bitcoin derivatives. The videos generated thousands of views and dozens of inbound inquiries. He hired a college friend from Ohio State a man named Dev Kothari, to manage what he called investor relations. In practice, Dev's job was to send out fabricated monthly statements and answer panicked emails when investors tried to log into a trading dashboard that did not exist. By March 2020, Giri Capital Strategies claimed to be managing $7 million across more than 90 investors. Ravi told the investors the figure. The fabricated statement supported it. The reality, reconstructed later by federal forensic accountants, was that the Huntington business account had at no point in 2019 or 2020 held more than $460,000 in actual deposits at any given moment. The rest had either been paid out to earlier investors, lost on Ravi's personal Coinbase trades, or spent on his living expenses. The pandemic, perversely, was the best thing that ever happened to the scheme. Bitcoin's price surged from under $4,000 in March 2020 to over $60,000 by April 2021. Ravi's fabricated monthly returns suddenly looked conservative against the real market. Investors stopped questioning. New investors flooded in. Word spread through the Indian American professional networks of Central Ohio, then to physicians groups at Mount Carmel and Riverside Methodist, then to a small circle of OSU football boosters who knew Ravi's family socially. By the summer of 2021, Giri Capital Strategies claimed to be managing over $12 million across 153 investors. It was, on paper, the Central Ohio crypto success story. He bought a 4-bedroom house in New Albany, paid $220,000 in cash on a down payment, and financed the rest with a mortgage funded, in effect, by other people's stolen money. He upgraded the BMW to a Porsche Cayenne. He took his parents on a 2-week vacation to Maui. He told his younger brother he could quit his entry-level marketing job in Cincinnati and join the firm as head of operations. Akash, to his lasting credit, declined. What Ravi did not do, in any month of any year between 2019 and 2022, was actually trade his investors' money in the way he had promised. The market-neutral algorithmic strategy did not exist. The proprietary model did not exist. There were no trades on Bitcoin perpetual swaps in any account held in the name of Giri Capital Strategies. There was only a Huntington checking account, a personal Coinbase account that Ravi continued to lose money on, and a Microsoft Word template that produced increasingly elaborate fabrications. The unraveling began in October 2021. Bitcoin had peaked at $69,000 on November 10th, and then began a slow, grinding decline. By January 2022, it was trading at $36,000. By May 2022, it was under $30,000. By June, after the collapse of the Terra Luna stablecoin and the bankruptcy of the crypto lender Celsius, it was under $20,000. The market panic produced the one thing every Ponzi scheme cannot survive: a coordinated wave of withdrawal requests. Between June 1st and August 15th, 2022, 41 of Ravi Giri's investors submitted formal requests to redeem all or part of their accounts. The total redemption requests exceeded $6 million. The actual cash in the Huntington business account, on August 15th, was approximately $84,000. Ravi did what every Ponzi operator in the historical record has done in this moment. He stalled. He told investors there was a temporary liquidity issue caused by, quote, unprecedented market conditions and exchange withdrawal delays. He sent emails citing fictitious counterparty defaults on his fictitious trading platform. He promised that withdrawals would be processed within 30 days, then 90 days, then by the end of the year. He hosted a Zoom call for the largest investors on August 22nd and told them, with the precise calm of someone who had rehearsed the speech in front of a mirror, that their principal was, quote, absolutely safe. One of the investors on that Zoom call was a partner at a Columbus law firm named Eric Hollander. He had invested $600,000 of family money in March 2021. He hung up the call, opened a new email, and forwarded the entire investor communication chain to a contact at the Columbus field office of the FBI. The FBI assigned the case to Special Agent Teresa Bowen, a financial crimes investigator with 11 years in the Bureau and a previous career as a forensic accountant at a Big Four firm. Within 72 hours, she had subpoenaed the Huntington account records. Within 2 weeks, she had obtained statements from Ravi's personal Coinbase account. Within a month, she had interviewed 12 of the investors. The arithmetic was not subtle. $12 million had come in. $84,000 remained. The Commodity Futures Trading Commission, which had been receiving its own complaints through a parallel channel, filed a civil enforcement action against Giri Capital Strategies in September 2022. The complaint alleged the solicitation of more than $12 million and over 10 Bitcoin from more than 150 customers. A federal grand jury in the Southern District of Ohio returned an indictment on November 14, 2022, charging Ravi Giri with 5 counts of wire fraud. He was arrested at his new Albany house at 6:15 on the morning of November 16th. He answered the door in an Ohio State sweatshirt and pajama pants. He did not resist. We are heading into the investigation and the courtroom now. If you have made it this far, you already know this channel does not soften these stories. Subscribe if you want to see exactly how the system handles a fraud this brazen. The aggravator at sentencing is something you have to hear to believe, and it is the reason the judge added years to what would otherwise have been a much shorter sentence. The federal investigation into Giri Capital Strategies took 11 months and consumed the working hours of 6 FBI agents, 3 forensic accountants from the Department of Justice's Fraud Section, and 2 attorneys from the United States Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Ohio. The lead prosecutor was a fraud section trial attorney named Daniel Voss, who had spent the previous 4 years working complex investment fraud cases out of Washington. The evidence, when it was finally assembled and presented to the grand jury, fell into 4 categories. First, the financial records. The Huntington business account had received deposits from 153 identified individuals, totaling approximately $11,860,000 between February 2019 and August 2022. Outflows from that same account included approximately $3,200,000 in payments to earlier investors, approximately $1,700,000 in transfers to Ravi's personal Coinbase account, and approximately $2,100,000 in personal expenditures. The new Albany house, the Porsche Cayenne, vacations to Maui and Vail, restaurant tabs at the Refectory and Hyde Park Prime Steakhouse, jewelry purchases at the Easton Town Center, and a series of cash withdrawals totaling $430,000 that Ravi could not subsequently account for. Second, the fabricated documents. Forensic examiners recovered from Ravi's home computer and from a backup hard drive in his office closet more than 900 individual account statements created in Microsoft Word and exported to PDF. Each statement bore the Giri Capital Strategies logo. Each listed trades that had never occurred. The forensic team was able to demonstrate, by examining the document metadata, that the statements had been created and edited by a single user account on a single laptop, with timestamps that corresponded to the days before each scheduled monthly investor mailing. Third, the communications. Investigators recovered tens of thousands of emails, text messages, and direct messages on Instagram and WhatsApp. The pattern was consistent. To prospective investors, Ravi described his strategy in confident technical jargon and explicitly promised guaranteed returns of principal. To existing investors asking about withdrawals, he produced increasingly elaborate explanations involving exchange withdrawal limits, counterparty failures, and regulatory delays. To Dev Kothari, the college friend who handled investor relations, he was blunter. In a WhatsApp exchange dated July 19, 2022, Dev wrote, "Bro, what do I tell Patel? He is asking for his 200K. Ravi replied, "Tell him next month. Buy time. I am working on it." Dev wrote back, "Working on what?" Ravi did not respond. Fourth, and most damaging, the recordings. 2 of Ravi's investors, suspicious of the delays in mid-2022, had begun recording their phone calls with him. Ohio is a one-party consent state, and the recordings were legal and admissible. In one recording, made on June 28, 2022, an investor named Lakshmi Patel asked Ravi directly whether her principal was safe. Ravi's reply, in his own voice, was the smoking gun. "Your principal is guaranteed," he said. "I have told you that from day one. There is zero risk to your principal. Zero. It was the same promise, in the same words, that he had made to the anesthesiologist in February 2019, 3.5 years apart, to two investors who had never met. The promise of guaranteed returns with zero risk was, in itself, a textbook indicator of fraud. Every regulator who would later review the case file said so on the record. And Ravi had made the promise twice, identically, in a manner that could only have been deliberate. The grand jury reviewed the evidence in early November 2022. The indictment came down on the 14th. The arrest followed 2 days later. The confrontation at the new Albany house was not dramatic. 5 FBI agents in tactical vests, an unmarked Suburban in the driveway, and a search warrant issued the previous afternoon by a federal magistrate. Ravi answered the door at 6:15 in the morning. He was holding a coffee mug. The lead agent, Teresa Bowen, identified herself and her team. Special Agent Bowen. Rathnakishore Giri? Ravi. Yes. Bowen. I have a federal arrest warrant and a search warrant for these premises. Please step outside and place the mug on the porch. Ravi. Can I see the warrant? Bowen. Yes. Step outside first. He stepped outside. He placed the mug on a small wrought iron table next to the front door. He read the warrant in silence for about 90 seconds. Ravi. I want to call my attorney. Bowen. You will be permitted to do that at the field office. You are under arrest for wire fraud. Ravi. I understand. Can I get a jacket? It is cold. A second agent went inside, returned with a North Face fleece, and handed it to him. The agents handcuffed him on the porch. He did not speak again on the drive to the FBI field office on Bethel Road. He invoked his right to counsel within the first 90 seconds of the formal interview and made no further statement. His attorney, a Columbus defense lawyer named Jonathan Westhaver, was contacted by Ravi's parents within the hour and was at the field office before 9 that morning. By the end of the day, Ravi was released on a $150,000 unsecured bond on conditions that included home detention, GPS monitoring, the surrender of his passport, and an explicit prohibition on any further solicitation of investors or operation of any investment business. It was that last condition, the prohibition on soliciting investors, that he would violate repeatedly for the next 2 years. Ravi Giri pleaded guilty on October 22, 2024, to 1 count of wire fraud, with the government agreeing to dismiss the remaining 4 counts at sentencing. The plea hearing, conducted before United States District Judge Sarah Morrison in the federal courthouse on East Marconi Boulevard, was uneventful. Ravi answered the standard plea colloquy questions in a flat, controlled voice. He acknowledged that he had defrauded investors. He acknowledged that he had used new investor funds to pay earlier investors. He acknowledged that the trading strategy he had described to investors did not exist. The sentencing date was set for the following spring and was eventually continued, at the defense's request, to May of 2026. What happened between October 2024 and May 2026 became the aggravator that defined the case. In January 2025, while on pre-trial release and home detention, Ravi met a Columbus area business owner at a coffee shop near Easton. The meeting was logged by his GPS monitoring device, but his pre-trial officer did not flag it in real time because home detention permitted limited travel for medical, legal, and grocery purposes. The business owner had been introduced to him through a mutual acquaintance who did not know about the indictment. Over the course of 2 further meetings in February and March, Ravi pitched the business owner on a Bitcoin trading opportunity. He described the strategy in the same language he had used in 2019. He promised 8 to 12% monthly returns. He guaranteed the principal. The business owner wrote a check for $75,000 in April. He was not the only one. Federal investigators would later identify 3 additional victims who had been solicited and, in 2 cases, accepted as investors during the 17 months Ravi was on pre-trial release. The total taken in during this period was approximately $194,000. None of it was traded. All of it was either spent or transferred to a checking account at Fifth Third Bank, that Ravi had opened in his younger brother's name, using Akash's driver's license information, without Akash's knowledge or permission. The conduct came to light when the original business owner, alarmed by Ravi's failure to produce a withdrawal in November 2025, searched his name online and discovered the 2022 indictment and the 2024 guilty plea. The business owner contacted Special Agent Bowen directly. Bowen, who had been preparing the sentencing memorandum for May 2026, opened a supplemental investigation. Within 6 weeks, she had documented the 4 additional victims and the additional $194,000. The government moved to amend the plea agreement. Ravi's attorney, faced with the prospect of his client being charged with additional counts of wire fraud committed while under federal supervision, agreed to a revised plea in which Ravi admitted the new conduct in exchange for the government not bringing fresh charges. The amended plea was entered on March 4, 2026. The sentencing memorandum, when it was filed 3 weeks before the May hearing, did not so much argue for a harsh sentence as describe a defendant who could not stop. The sentencing took place on May 18, 2026, in the same courthouse where Ravi had pleaded guilty 19 months earlier. The government called 4 victims to give impact statements. 3 were Columbus area physicians who had each lost between $100,000 and $300,000 of retirement savings. The 4th was a 58-year-old widow from Westerville named Carla Reinhold, who had invested $440,000 from her late husband's life insurance settlement. Her statement, read in a steady voice from a single folded sheet of notebook paper, lasted 7 minutes. The last line was, "He looked me in the eye and told me my money was safe. I believed him because I had no reason not to." Judge Sarah Morrison spoke from the bench for approximately 12 minutes before pronouncing sentence. Her statement, in part, read as follows. Mr. Giri, this court has reviewed the presentence report, the government's sentencing memorandum, and the defendant's submissions. I have read every victim impact statement filed in this case. What troubles me is not the original conduct, though that conduct is grave. What troubles me is your conduct after October of 2024. You stood in this courtroom, you swore an oath, and you admitted to defrauding more than 150 investors. And then, within 90 days, you began the same conduct again. The defense has suggested this was a compulsion. I do not find that explanation mitigating. I find it deeply aggravating. A defendant who continues to commit the offense after pleading guilty to it has demonstrated to this court that nothing short of incarceration will protect the public from him. The sentence was 9 years in federal prison, 3 years of supervised release, and restitution in the amount of $10,214,000. Ravi Giri was remanded to the custody of the United States Marshals Service at the conclusion of the hearing. He was 31 years old. He was designated to serve his sentence at the Federal Correctional Institution in Milan, Michigan, a low-security facility approximately 3 hours north of Columbus, where he is projected to be released with credit for good conduct in 2034. His parents were in the courtroom. His mother wept. His father did not. His younger brother Akash, the one who had refused the job offer in 2020, and the one whose name had been forged on a Fifth Third checking account in 2025, sat in the second row and did not look at the defense table once during the entire hearing. The lawsuit Akash filed against his brother for identity theft was settled, quietly, 3 months later. This case was brazen, but the case on the right-hand side might be the most calculating fraud we have ever covered. Click it now.